But what do we do about this, and what's really going on here, broadly speaking, in America? Let's go beyond the frame of healthcare. Let's expand. Healthcare is, I think, emblematic, symptomatic of something much, much larger. And the much, much larger is, frankly, is the loss of power and the loss of democracy by many people in America. And the sense that that's lost, the feeling that that's lost, the concern that that's lost. Some of the comments that have been made. Mark Miller sent this one. One of the people commenting on what's going on with the deathers, the folks who are shouting out in the healthcare debates. He says the Democrats filled 1/3 of the room with their mob supporters. Most were from unions, Democratic Party of Florida, Organizing America, Obama's campaign arm. One woman said she was there from a group of Glenn Beck supporters. I mean, basically what we have is a face-off. Is that a good thing? Anna sends me a note. She says, I'm offering a suggestion to tone down emotions at the town hall meetings. Stand for health care. Stand and move to the other side of the room. Don't shout. It accomplishes many things doing it this way. It eliminates the illusion that all the attendees are against reform, and it shows that there's support for universal health care. It lowers the emotional state. Well, here's a couple of problems, Anna. I know David Wu, who is one of my congressmen right here in this district, right here in Portland, held a meeting yesterday, and the hard right, the freakout group, the deathers, and I want to find a less derogatory term because, as I said, I think these are by and large well-intentioned people who don't understand the issues and are being manipulated by people like Sarah Palin and Newt Gingrich, who have big bucks at stake and a lot of political power, and John Boehner, a lot of political power at stake if they can bring this thing down. Jim DeMint talking about how he's going to destroy Obama with this. So, first of all, it may well be that the entire room is nothing but them because they got there first. They're showing up hours early. Secondly, you say it shows that there's support for universal health care. Universal health care, if we're talking single payer, that's not what's on the table. But let's look at the largest frame possible. Chris Hedges was writing at truthdig.com. I was over in Common Dreams yesterday. And he was on this program week before last, and we were talking about this very issue. And it's an issue that you and I have talked about a lot of times over the years. And it's a tough one. This is a real tough one for Americans, for patriotic Americans. And I'm just going to share with you the first couple of sentences here. Chris Hedges writes, the American empire has not altered under Barack Obama. It kills as brutally and indiscriminately in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan as it did under George W. Bush. Well, first of all, I'd say not quite. We're pulling out of Iraq, but still. Afghanistan, and we're apparently recalibrating our policy. I don't know if you saw, is it McStanley, the general in Pakistan, talking about we need new metrics, we need to be building more and blowing up less. So I'm not quite as, and yet at the same time I'm very concerned that Afghanistan is going to be Obama's Vietnam if he's not very, very careful. Chris Hedges goes on. He says it will not give us universal health care. Well, we'll see. It will not abolish the Bush secrecy laws. Actually, they've rolled back a number of them already. The transparency of government is dramatically greater than it was, but there are some of these laws that are still on the books, many of them. It will not end torture or extraordinary rendition. And in that regard, well, we've ended it on our grounds, and we've ended it as official policy, but there are still prisons, like Bagram Air Force Base in Afghanistan and others. The black sites, according to these undisclosed locations, according to the Obama administration, have actually been closed. So I'm not quite sure about that. He says the Obama administration will not restore habeas corpus, the right to face your accusers. Well, I think that ultimately we're going to. I think we're going to get there on that. And we're moving in that direction, certainly. We've stopped the process. We're not even referring to people as enemy combatants anymore. Obama's talking about shutting down Guantanamo and bringing people home. He says the Obama administration is not going to halt the warrantless wiretapping and monitoring of citizens. Well, that's a serious concern. And that goes to the heart of corporate power, because I think that the FISA bill was not so much, frankly, I think that the Bush and Cheney administrations were spying on people because they wanted to spy on their political enemies as much as anything else. And I think that the FISA bill that Obama voted for as a senator was really about protecting AT&T from lawsuits. It was all about giving immunity to the telco companies. So to the extent that the Obama administration is complicit in this, my sense of it is that it's not because they want to listen in on the political conversations of their political opponents. It's because they wanted to make sure that these big corporations, who are major funders of both parties, didn't end up in court sitting across the table from somebody like Ellen Ratner's brother, Michael, who runs the organization, the Center for Constitutional Rights, that has 3 times successfully gone to the Supreme Court, maybe 4 times, and won cases on behalf of detainees at Guantanamo, and him and people like him were fixing to sue about the warrantless wiretapping, and they weren't going to sue the government. They were going to sue AT&T. Which brings us to the larger issue. As I said, I'm not given into Chris Hedges' despair totally, and and Ralph Nader and I have had this conversation a number of times, again, on this program. And I'm not ready to declare the Democratic Party dead. But Chris Hedges says the Democrats have been doing this since Bill Clinton, doing this to us. Since Bill Clinton, it's the same old merry-go-round, only with Obama branding. Our last hope is to step outside of the two-party system, Hedges says, and build movements that defy the Republicans and the Democrats. Now, here's the reality. If you go back and you look at the end of slavery, the anti-slavery movement, it was independent to a large extent of political parties. I'm talking about the anti-slavery movement in the 1600s, the 1700s, and the early 1800s. It was independent of political parties. And yet, at the same time, the Republican Party was brought into being in Jackson, Michigan in 1865 by many of the people who were part of that movement, the anti-slavery movement. The anti-slavery movement had always infiltrated the various political parties, from the Federalists to the Whigs to the Democratic Republicans. They had always infiltrated those parties and both worked within the parties and without the parties. And to have this totally binary view and say, no, they worked entirely outside the party. Wrong. Martin Luther King, the civil rights movement. It looks like it was, it was out of the Baptist churches, it was out of the African-American churches in the South by and large, and independent of the parties. And yet, there were people within the parties who were working very aggressively with them and on behalf of them. Good people joining the parties to make those happen. And it ultimately took a political party, the Democratic Party, to do away with apartheid in the United States, or at least take the first good, serious, axe to the trunk of the tree. And of course, that was Lyndon Johnson with the Civil Rights Acts. So, do we have movement politics or do we have party politics? I think one of the reasons that we're seeing the tea parties, the tea baggers, the showing up at the town hall meetings and all this kind of thing, why we're seeing that succeed is because a movement is growing that is outside of the Republican Party. And similarly, I think that we need a movement outside of the Democratic Party. But that movement is also within the Republican Party, and it's being encouraged by the Republican Party, and I believe that we need to be doing it within the Democratic Party and encouraging the Democratic Party. So how do we go about that? I'm going to riff on that for a little bit, and then we've got a caller coming up next who thinks we should call the Republicans bluff. Wonder how. We'll be back with your calls and more of this.